In today's world, I think our attention span is heavily jarred. Myself included, it's not easy to pay attention to a lot of details as to a lot of context surrounding things that we may be interested in. In fact, I've had people jump on me in the comment section, tell me, why do I care about sales data? Why do I care about looking at all of these data that have to pertain to video games? And they were upset with me. And I was laughing, going, yo, if I'm going to talk about the gaming industry, would it not be terrible of me to mislead anybody, or at least say things without having any data and any facts to back them up? And you see, that's the challenge that we face today. In fact, today's internet, people are so, in my opinion, attention, deficient, that they cannot take into account nuances that go around in terms of everything they're talking about. Do you guys remember when Baldur's Gate 3 had an issue with coming out on the Series S? And YouTubers, in some cases, content creators, went ahead to say that because of this, Baldur's Gate 3 happened to just be an exclusive to the PlayStation. It's simply because people like this want to be inflammatory. They want to drive traffic to people who they know are not going to necessarily pay attention to the details and are going to basically latch on to simple bites like this, and it's going to drag attention to them. That's exactly what we saw in this case. In fact, what's crazy is we're seeing this same thing happen with Black Myth Wukong. People are running all over the internet claiming and saying, oh, Black Myth Wukong is now some kind of a win for PlayStation because it's kind of an exclusive, because the Series S is the problem. What I wanted to do in this video is I wanted us to take a very good look at some of the development challenges that some game developers themselves have said that they face. Could this be that the Black Myth Wukong thing is actually a developer challenge more than anything else? Because as much as all these people will tell you that the Series S is, this kind of terrible, bad hardware, many of them would never dare tell you that, hardware that could run games like Arkham Knight is bad hardware, because all of those hardware pieces, those were highly underpowered compared to the Series S, but developers at Rocksteady were able to make a game and optimize that game after trying and failing the first time. This game came out busted on PC, and they eventually got the game to run even to the way that it actually is today. So if you think about those games that you used to play back in the day, if you think about how good they looked and how well they ran on the machines that they ran on, what has changed from the development times to today? I think we'll get a good sense when we hear from developers themselves as to some of the challenges they face, and it will help everybody get an understanding as to what might be going on in the background, and potentially maybe see that the Series S as a business proposition is just another hardware piece that is, in a sense, similar in power to a plethora of PC components that are out there that developers have to find out ways to optimize for. So let's first look at the Baldur's Gate 3 boss and his interview, his very famous interview that he talked about some of the challenges with the Series S version of the game at the time. And we're going to take a look following that to Glenn Schofield, where he talks about some challenges in actually the development of Callisto Protocol. And you're going to see and be able to maybe make up your mind and say, perhaps this is not something that is relegated to the Series S. It could be that because of gaming competition today, scope is getting bigger. Developers want to one-up developers. They want to basically come to the market and wow. And potentially many of them are facing hurdles by the time they get to end of development to basically get to the finish line. And most of them are probably, in a place where they just feel the need to go ahead and try to get some money and then eventually move on to developing for platforms that are probably a little bit more challenging to develop for. So let's listen to this gentleman.
I was reading some of the news stories about the Series S and Xbox development, and you said that you might have to make some compromises. And this is going to sound like a loaded question. I'm just genuinely interested in your opinion on it. With current gen consoles being what they are, in my head they are Series X and PlayStation 5. Do you think Microsoft having this kind of in-between model and then demanding that features be equal across both is kind of holding back development of games, and we're not truly going to get that next gen until Series S is left behind?
But they're not going to leave Series S behind.
But they're not going to.
They're not going to do that. So that basically means that you know what you're going to be able to do on the Xbox Series.
That is a very important statement. You see, This is one of those developers that understands ownership. I think today everyone's just talking all over the place. When consoles when consoles basically are being released, developers who are interested in getting into the console pipeline already know exactly what the specs are, and they can pretty much plan accordingly. This is not a matter of, say, the Series S is some underpowered hardware. You know your target hardware. In fact, on the PC side, developers usually target their minimum requirements. They do so based on data, by the way. And they also target their recommended requirements as well. Their minimum requirements are going to more than likely run the game at, say, the most minimal frame rates, the most minimal performance mode that they can actually get the game to run. And then their recommended is, if you want to get the very best minimal quality, this is what you should be doing. This is why when you go to places like Steam, or when you go to places like, Good Old Games or Epic Games, you're going to see how developers tell you exactly what it is that, you need to have in your gear. Right? They tell you straight up. They're like, hey, man, if you want to play Marvel Spider-Man 2, you need to make sure you have this kind of, CPU and this kind of GPU. This is what you need to play the game. This is how much RAM you need. And the same goes for developers when they're developing for console. This statement, every developer out there, the developers at Game Science, I love you guys, by the way. My kids love Black Myth Wukong. We've been playing it together. They knew exactly what they were going into when it came to developing for the Series X. So let's go ahead and let's continue to listen to this.
It defines the machine, which is fine. I think it's an okay proposition to say, hey, we have two devices. We want compatibility across the devices. I mean, so it's a platform thing. What you have to do then as a developer or publisher is decide, will I be on the platform, yes or no?
Simple. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm a wannabe developer. This is what I spend my time doing, by the way. I listen to everything I can on the gaming industry. I look at data. I look at, sales. I listen to game developer bosses. I just read what they say. Why? Because it really helps guide a lot of our decisions when it comes to framing the kind of game I would love to make one day. I would love to make an open world game, but I'm not going to make an open world game simply because having spoken to some developers who have actually worked in the industry, they told me we work our butts off to get games that are open world to run on any system. Don't you dare do it. You're a small team. Don't put your team through that madness. Maybe future down the road, you can try something like that, but it is not feasible for a small team, a small developer to want to do something like that. It will basically derail your game when it comes down to tying up everything. This sensibility is something that within the developer space, a lot of developers know. That's developers who actually want to ship games. So it's interesting to hear him actually say this. In fact, I like listening to this stuff over and over again, but this is in my ears anyways.
Because it's like us deciding to come to a Switch or not, right? Do we want to be on the Switch? Okay, we got to make it work on the Switch and make it work well. Otherwise, we can't be on the Switch. And like this, it goes for every single platform. So I don't think that's a choice they made. And they have valid reasons for it. I think the majority of people own a Series S. So it makes sense that if you go to Xbox, that it has to work on the Series S. Otherwise, you're not going to be serving the majority of people. So it'd be kind of silly to drop that. But at the same time, I understand. At the same time, it makes it challenging to develop it for that platform. And there's other platforms. Like when we did DOS 2, we did DOS 2 on PC. A year later, we did it on PS4. And then a year later, we did it on Switch. They've been working on that Switch version for a long time, right? Yeah. So, but it just took a lot of effort to get it there. But you have to do it. And so, yeah, for us, it was liberating that we forced ourselves into the situation that we're going to do a sim ship. Oh, we got to.
So this is actually very beautiful. I'm looking at the game that, we're trying to make, and I'm thinking, what platforms do I want to target? I didn't think about the Switch simply because I know that the target platform is just not, powerful enough. Now, if the Switch 2 becomes like a Steam Deck style power, then fine. Maybe, I'll start looking towards trying to do that. And I'm sure many developers also do the exact same thing. They look at a platform and they're like, do we want to bother with this platform? And sometimes it doesn't really matter about the platform being underpowered or whatever. They probably have an audience base there that they want to target. One example will be Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat 1 has a Switch version, doesn't have a PS4 or an Xbox One version. I have no idea why, but it seems like that's just the case that the game has, because it seems they have like an audience there, and they just felt their PS4 audience and their Xbox One audience will probably just move up, or they did not want to bother with making a PS4 and an Xbox One version. There are many reasons that this could have been the case. They probably tested it out on those platforms and were like, bro, we got work to do here. But the Switch version, maybe they already have a pipeline for that, and they evaluated and they saw the money that they were going to make. But if you hear what he said they did their different versions 1 year after the other simply because of their resources. It's just that simple.
Do a sim ship. We've never done a sim ship. Let's do a sim ship, right?
So Baldur's Gate 3 got delayed on Xbox simply because they all decided to do a same ship. I can't believe like everybody ran all over the place and said, oh, it was a Series S. But you hear the guy who actually made the game for that Xbox and said, we just put ourselves in a pressure just to do same ship. They've never done a same ship before. They decided that they were going to go ahead and do it. Well, when you want to do a same ship, now you got to drop the game on PC. Now you got to drop the game on whichever platforms that you're going for. And with the Series S being underpowered than the Series X, it's not easy to just do the tit for tat that you would normally have done if you were doing maybe PS5 and Series X, similar hardware, around the same range, and be able to get them working. Now you got to take a little extra effort to get a Series S version going as well. So listen to what he says here.
And the sim ship almost became a sink ship. In the sense that because it was killing us. So the moment we let it loose, we got more breathing room, so we can actually focus on the platforms as we should. And maybe that's just a model for us, right? Other developers do it differently. But now we can focus on PC, we can focus on PS5, we can focus on other platforms after that. And that's, for us, it's going to be better because if you look at all the releases we did in the past, we always try to make the most of whatever platform is there. Like if you look at the Switch, what was done by the team on those two was amazing. It was one of the first games that had Steam Cloud saves. It runs really well on the Switch. It was really, I was very proud of them, but it just takes time to make these things.
Simple. So for all of the attention deficit that we've had surrounding these stories and seeing what people are writing in the press, I've always been surprised that many of them did not take at least the context to break down all what was said here. It was easy to basically run with headlines and just make everything sound crazy. Now, let's go ahead and jump to Glenn Schofield. I did say this video was going to be a long form video. This is not the kind of video that you just watch a few bites and just run away. There's a lot to be covered here in terms of what, ground needs to be. So let's listen to Glenn, tell Dan Allen a little bit of the challenges. And this is from the timestamp here, working on, development problems with Callisto Protocol here in the 10-minute, 20-second mark.
How much pressure was on you on that project? Because you also, I don't think people understand that you're working through COVID. Like COVID hit you guys pretty hard as well, didn't it?
Oh man, well, first of all, we started off with a new studio, a new company, a new engine, a new IP, a new everything.
Everything, yeah.
And then we're 6 months into it, and they call up and they're like, "Oh, by the way, there's new consoles." They actually thought, "Okay, we'll just switch to PS5, right?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, that's a magnitude harder." And like, what do you mean? It's 4 to 5. And I'm like, yeah, it's we're talking millions of dollars more. And like, really,
you can't just flick.
Yeah. Well, first of all, they don't come with
instruction
manual. And if it did, the PlayStation would be in Japanese, so we'd have to.
Yeah.
I mean, people don't realize that all of a sudden you get another supercomputer handed to you, and nobody knows what it's doing. It's tough. So.
But it's not. It wasn't as bad as the.
It's tough. Again, our attention spans are so jarred. We don't even listen to the people that make our video games. We don't spend enough time paying attention to some of the things that they say. This interview was released, 2 weeks ago. It only has 27,000 views. Now, the Baldur's Gate 3 one a year ago has 178,000 views on it. But the warring and the tweeting and the trying to get a score up on somebody was insane during that time. It was way more important than actually listening to the prevailing thought around the hardware thing. I believe the developers at Game Science for Black Myth Wukong have looked at the business proposition of launching the game for PC first, which will be majority of their audience, which has paid off. 10 million plus copies sold. Launching on PS5 that doesn't have a mid-range hardware, just one SKU, and then eventually going back for the Series S before then launching on Xbox, which Xbox says, hey, if you're going to make a game for the Series console, you need to make it for the Series S. Now, here's another thing that I think a lot of people have basically taken and misplaced somewhere. They think when the Xbox parity statement comes into play that it means that the game has to run the exact same way as it does on the Series X. I don't think that that's true, simply because when Evil Dead was about to release, this is when I ever saw, somebody actually bring out like their console performance and talk about it, because at this time performance was a big deal, right? It was a massive deal. And so what the developers did was they went ahead and they actually published what the performance of the game will be running on various I didn't say Evil Dead, I meant Evil West. Sorry. Why did I say Evil Dead? They published what the performance would be running on the different consoles. And I also remember that caused a big issue itself. So let's go ahead and do this, because this same game came out at the time. So for them, they brought the game out on the Xbox One, they brought it on the PS4, the Series S and the Series X and the PS5. Xbox One, basically, I remember that was the time when Xbox One X was running it at a higher resolution than the Series S. Yes, I remember that. I remember that's where the drama was from. There was this huge issue saying, oh my gosh, it's going to be 30 FPS on the Series S. So, the Xbox One was 1080 30 FPS. The Xbox One X was 2160 30 FPS. PS4 was, 1080p 30. PS4 Pro, same. The Series S was 1080 30, basically playing like last gen. The Series X was 2160 30 FPS. And then if you wanted 60, you had to go to 1080p, and basically the same for the PlayStation 5. And this game launched just like that. So the parity clause is basically coming out at least in similar quality, and it's not necessarily in the same performance. So once the developers at Game Science can basically find a ground for it, I think the game is going to launch. I think that's basically what it is. Now that they've basically put out the game, they've gotten some sales. We've seen how challenging the game is on certain hardware. I've seen some people say it doesn't really run well on a 4090. To be very honest, I'm trying to play mine. If I'm playing on my 4090 build, it's at 4K, maybe reducing the resolution. I realized that my $650 computer actually runs it flawlessly at 1080p, which is, I was shocked. So perhaps it's a resolution thing. The game probably just doesn't have good optimization as your resolution starts to climb. That's why many of the 4090 folk are seeing issues. But again, you buy a 4090, you expect to play at least at 4K. So I can understand where it is. I think at even 2K, basically 1440, I've seen Wukong do very well. But let's do this. Let's keep listening to what the Baldur's Gate boss said, because we want to basically ensure that we get good and decent context about all of this stuff at the end of the day. Okay? So it's very interesting.
Should you then let that version define when the other versions are available? That's a question that you have to make for yourself commercially. We chose not to do that.
And the same applied to the people at, Game Science. It is what it is. So at the end of the day, I see a lot of people saying Xbox needs to abandon the Series S. And I'm like, why would they do that? They made hardware just the way you'd expect for companies like AMD, companies like Intel to go ahead and make hardware, right? I mean, AMD made their hardware. If you go to AMD, like say you go to AMD's main store, what you're going to see is you're going to see all kinds of SKUs for every category of product. They'll have a CPU that's called a 7800X3D. If you have $500, you can have this CPU. Or if you can't have the CPU, they make a 7600X. This is all AM5 stuff for what your money can buy. This is how hardware is made. Graphics cards, they have everything in their, their RX generations, depending on the generation that you're looking at. and they'll have everything all lined up and numbered. I have two AMD graphics cards. I have a 6750 XT and I have a 6800 XT. I did the 6750 XT for our folk who are trying to come to PC, and I was making that build to show them how it worked. I was doing benchmarks. I had people yelling all over the internet saying all kinds of weird stuff. I was like, all right, I'm just going to put it here and just play video games. So I plugged it up in my living room. I'm not going to do benchmarks with it because some people didn't want to see it. They were like, I think maybe the fact that a $650, PC beats the console, maybe that upsets some people. But if you want to come to PC, it's possible to do so. But I think Xbox followed this, particular style of making their, their console SKUs, and they've done it too. I mean, refreshes happen as well too within, some of the consoles, but they'll go a little higher. And I think they did that just to be able to give options in terms of price and in terms of cost for their customers. So if this is not something that people can actually reason with, it really makes it hard to have an intelligent conversation about this stuff that's so technical from every standpoint you look at it.
And so that's just it. But that doesn't say anything about the platform. I think the platform is perfectly fine. Mm-hmm. It's just like if you want to imagine that somebody comes out with like the equivalent of a PS7 now, right? Mm-hmm. And then you will have to make a choice. Will I release it on PS7? It means I can't release it on the others. Mm-hmm. So that's essentially what is going on. It's like and as a PC developer, which is what we were used to that. You have always had different platforms, min specs that scale. Like you have to say, these are your min specs. You're going to work on that.
I can't believe it, man. I just cannot believe the madness that is going on the internet while all of this stuff is sitting right here and is basically getting ignored because it's just convenient to be, prude and brash about this stuff, even when in reality, we know, most of us know. And for those who maybe you're not aware, maybe it's just easier to make a complaint about everything. Maybe we don't want to take time to look at what the challenges are. And then at the end of the day, whenever you say things to people and say, maybe come to PC, they say, no, PC is so complicated. Well, the consoles that you're using, they're basically PCs. They're literally PCs. I think Xbox has basically the real picture of what PC can look like from a platform perspective. And so you can hear the boss saying it himself. We've always had this on PC. PCs basically had multiple SKUs, more than any console generation, all the console generations put together. Every single generation of PC CPUs that come out from AMD and Intel from back in the day, they'll have like all kinds of different specs to them. And even with AM4, it just went crazy at the time. When AMD decided to launch Ryzen, it was over, man. There's hardware everywhere. I can't imagine trying to actually make a PC game in today's day. But I think that's probably why everybody's using the standard of the 1060 and Ryzen 5 1600 or Ryzen 5 3600 in terms of how they're basically doing their CPU, GPU, parity.
So anyway, I'm deviating. But to answer your question...
You're not deviating, sir. You're making sense. You're teaching these people that, hey, this whole hardware thing that you've dived into because these console manufacturers decided that they were going to overhype their consoles. And I said it to y'all back then. I said they're overhyped. They overhyped this thing. They oversold it to us. It's not as simple as it is from the developer side and from the, from just taking it at face value. Every game is different. Every game's going to run differently. Starfield, even Xbox themselves, they saw how challenging it was to squeeze in that big, Starfield game into the Series X and the Series S, and then it took them over a year to get it to 60 FPS.
We're going to get there. It's just going to take some time. Do I think that it holds it back? Just defines certain parameters within which you have to develop, and there's ways of doing that. It just takes development effort, and that effort, despite us having grown, we don't have infinite resources. So that means that we can't do everything at the same time.
Perfectly stated. A developer that basically knows this is where we are in game development as a studio, and this is where we're going. Has anybody not even taken the time to ask, well, how about all these other games that are coming down the pipeline from the bigger developers and the bigger studios? Ubisoft is coming out with a Star Wars game. EA is, basically just dropped, their FC soccer game yet. They dropped that game, all platforms. They dropped their college football game, both the Series X, S, and the PS5. The reason a lot of these studios can basically make these kinds of development choices is simply because they have the resources. Even EA more recently is bringing out the Star Wars Jedi Survivor on the PS4. Did you guys see that news? It took an entirely different year for that game to then eventually get a PS4 port. Actually, over a year. It's insane. Why didn't they do all of the development at once before coming to the last gen, consoles? It was simply because the last gen console development was probably going to take them more time. You can bring your games to whichever platform you want. You just got to make sure that you have more time. And I think, again, it goes into that side where they want to go ahead and make more money. This is an expensive game, because Disney and, Lucasfilms, they're going to be taking a lot of money from you. So anyways, I thought I'd make this video as a long form video. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make this video like the only video you see when you come in, to the Video Game Fight School channel. That way, if anybody's asking anything about all of this stuff, I'm just going to point this video to them, because I've made, little tidbits in terms of videos about this particular topic, but I think a lot of people are probably not aware as to all of the details, as to everything that actually goes into this whole conversation. And they keep saying things like the Series S is holding this generation back. The Series S is holding this generation back. When in reality, if you were to use that standard, the person who has like a supercomputer at home, who wants to play the same games that are being, targeted to consoles and you, is probably also saying the same thing. The consoles are holding, gaming back. Like that makes no sense. Developers have always been able to optimize for, some of the craziest hardware they can fit games into. But I'll let this video end right here. And if you have any comments, let me hear them in the comment section. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for sticking around. If you stuck around to the end, hopefully we'll talk pretty soon in another one. Peace out.